If you're getting started in squid fishing and you want to know more, then stick around. Well, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there's squid. They live in every ocean, multiple different species, and like everything in squid, they have a short life cycle, and the whole purpose is to get as big as you can to spawn and then die. Squid are so good because you can catch them in most cases really close to shore. So it doesn't matter if you're in a boat like I am here or land-based. They are a viable option. You can have the best gear in the world or just a simple hand line. Squid are so good. Great bait, amazing eating. I'm going to run you through the A to Z of how to not only target squid but catch more of them. Starting with this is my rod, and I'm going to give you one tip straight up. This is a simple, easy way to store your fishing rod. If it's a two-piece, and squid rods are generally quite long, what I like to do is just have rubber band around the foregrip like so, and if you just do that, it's now separated. To put it back on, you go around the stripper guide, around like that, and it's held nicely. A rubber band at the bottom end. Watch this, we pop that off, chuck it in my pocket for the end of the session when I need to pack the rod up, and there you are, absolutely ready to start fishing. From there, a little bit of line off like that, rod together, put it in at 90 degrees. So as you can see, that there is 90 degrees to that there. Put it in, you don't need to ram it on there. Twist that, it locks the graphite fibers together. Strip a bit of line off, like so. And then I like to use a little clip or a snap, quite simply because then I can change squid jigs as I need to, but also at the end of the session, you take the jig off, everything's nice and neat. Now squid jigs, I'm going to run you through them properly later, but they come in a myriad of colors and sizes and even a few different shapes, but for the most part, they are designed to look like a prawn or a shrimp. So when they glide through the water, that's what they look like. Heaps of different colors here, from darks to brights and everything in between. And another interesting fact, squid see UV light and monochrome. So basically they see black and white, but they see UV light. So UV additives and enhancements in squid jigs are a really popular thing. We've got a bit of sun, a bit of cloud here today. So I'm going to go with a slightly brighter jig, like this guy here, with a lot of UV in it, and that will stand out to the squid. Let's get to it, and I'm going to keep running through, I suppose, the bits and pieces that make squid fishing so fun, so popular, and so enjoyable. When it comes to finding a squid location, the first thing you generally want to look for is rock, reef and weed. Okay, so that gives the squid not only habitat to live in, but also to hide from predators, because everything loves to eat squid, not only humans, but also it makes a perfect hunting ground for them, because in all those areas, that's where you'll find their food, like little fish, shrimps, crabs, things like that, that they want to eat. So it's not only habitat for them to live, but also to hunt. So that's really important. If you're in an area and it's all sandy there and it's all reefy and weedy here, that's the area that I would target. The second, and one of the most important factors too, is try and find clean water. They love that clean water because they're almost like not a filter feeder, but they have a very fine gill system to them, if it's called a gill system. So dirty water is not ideal for squid. Generally when the water gets stirred up and dirty, it can be rough so long as it's clean. But as long as it's clean, that's where they'll be. If it's dirty and silty, they will generally have pushed out into deeper water where they can, I suppose, breathe and live better. So they are two very key elements. There's lots and lots of ground along your coastline, and a good thing to look for, obviously, if you've got a big sandy beach, that generally means there's all sand. Rocky headlands, things like that, ocean rocks. Everyone thinks squid are also in bays and estuaries. That's the only place they'll be. But for the most part, squid live in the ocean. So ocean rocks where there's weed and things like that, they absolutely love it. So look for those areas. If the water's dirty, keep moving, okay? Find that clean water and you'll generally find where the squid will be. There you go, you can see that long, soft rod, just acting like a big shock absorber with your squid. You don't need to go crazy on them, don't have too much drag, so that when they want to pull, they can take line. And then you just keep them coming nice and steady. And then when it comes to landing the squid without making too much mess, this guy's hooked in a great spot. See how the jig, the hooks are right up near the top of his head? The trick is to not try and get it in the boat. But if we go like that and you point him straight out, it's generally a good thing. The other one, don't let them hit the deck. When they hit the deck, that's when they'll just instantly ink. But see here, prongs right in the top of his head there, that's the hardest part. And you'll see that that's a reasonable size jig for what is a small squid. I'll let this guy go, I reckon. All right, so when I'm fishing in the boat, it's important that you position yourself the right way. Now, you can do this two ways. You can put a jig out the back and just have it drifting, but wherever you're casting, you want to try and cast with the drift, okay? You don't want to cast against the drift, because I want to be able to cast, all right? And if you've got breeze from behind, that also helps, because it helps you get a longer cast. But when I'm drifting towards my jig, it also allows it that when I work the jig like so, as I'm drifting towards it, I'm giving it slack line, allowing that jig to fall nicely. If I cast that way when I'm drifting this way, every time I flick the rod or move the squid jig and I drop the rod, the line will pull tight really quick and it will stop that jig from sinking and doing what I want it to do. Like I said, that's fine if you've got jigs drifting out the back, but if I'm trying to sink them down, then cast with your drift. Probably the cast I love the most though, rather than casting directly with my drift, is sort of a 45-degree angle cast. So I'm currently drifting this way, but a cast on that angle I just love, because you get great distance in your cast, but also you'll find that you get a really direct feel to the squid jig, okay? When you're casting straight at it, you're obviously drifting towards the line, so you have to do more winding. This way, we're getting the jig to sink, but we're doing less winds, which also means that we're keeping that jig in the zone for a little bit longer. And that's critical. Keep it in the zone, you're gonna catch yourself more squid or fish or whatever it is that you're actually fishing for. This doesn't just relate to fishing for squid, this is for many different species. That 45-degree angle cast is really, really helpful. And that's what happens when you get just the squid grabbing it by the very end of his tentacle. Unfortunately, I broke it off. That's why I prefer it when they eat it properly and you hook them in the top of the head. Okay, as I mentioned at the start, you can use a hand line if you want for squid. However, if you want to, I suppose, do it properly, then getting yourself a good squid rod does serve several advantages. Look, you can use any rod you want. Main factor is make sure it's reasonably light, okay, but also fairly soft in taper. And when I'm talking about soft in taper, it means that we want the whole rod to bend, all right, not just the tip and then it lock up. And the whole idea is that if the rod's soft, it's going to serve two purposes. But when that squid's lunging on the line, the whole rod bends and you don't rip the jig out of their tentacles if it's just hooked, but also the long soft rod helps with the casting, and I'll go more into that. So the other factor is, especially if you're land-based, you'll find squid rods that are designed as squid rods are generally quite long. I suppose 7'6" would be regarded as a short one. They go right up to sort of 9, even 9'6", but anything in that 8 to 8'3" is really popular. What it does is it serves two purposes. As I mentioned, nice and soft, helps you to hook the squid, but also keep the squid on. But it also helps you with your casting, like so. The idea of these is because they're that long, soft taper, when we launch the squid jig, and a trick is have a bit of line off the rod tip. We don't want to do a snappy sort of cast with a squid jig, like if you were casting a soft plastic or something, you know, where you snap it out there. With these, have that bit of line off the tip. And it's almost more like the cast that you would do on a surf rod. So come back and then a big long sort of over catapult cast. And what the rod does is on the back cast, when you start to come forward, the whole rod starts to load. So when you come forward and you let that jig go, it acts like a big, I suppose, catapult or a spring. It just sort of punches that squid jig forward and you get a lot better distance with it. But the other great factor about a proper squid rod is, if you get one, or any rod, I suppose, with a softer taper, when you work the squid jig like this, you can't really see it like this. But when you do that, the whole rod sort of loads up and then pulls the jig up through the water. And because it's not snapping the jig so quick, it allows the squid jig to zigzag left and right or jump and do whatever it's supposed to do. If the rod's too stiff, when you do this, the jig just gets ripped forward, so it just has that sort of swimming action instead of a zigzag, which is what most of them are supposed to be doing. So the rods serve their purpose, and that's what it is. Distance, working the jig, but then also when you get the squid on, keeping that squid on. So look at those factors, whether you go for a proper squid rod or just any sort of rod, light, parabolic taper, and you're gonna find yourself catching more and landing more squid. Okay, so reel size, get one that suits the rod you're using. You don't need a big reel to catch a squid. This is a 2500, but something in that 2500 to 3000 size is ideal. When it comes to braid, I don't necessarily like overly light braid. Two reasons. You'll find you are going to get snagged and you will lose some squid jigs when you're fishing over heavy ground. So I also fish personally a heavier leader. I think this is 12 or 15 pound, and the idea of the slightly heavier leader and then something in sort of that, I suppose, 15 pound sort of braid, that PE 0.1, something like that, you'll find it casts better. It actually shoots through these little tiny guides a lot better because it shoots really straight. It doesn't want to throw little loops, and that's also the idea of these small guides. It chokes the braid as it shoots through the rod and makes it shoot straight. So, you know, you'll cast further with a slightly heavier braid, but also when you get snagged, you don't break off as often and you won't lose as many jigs. You will still lose the odd squid jig, and that's just a fact of life. So as with any form of fishing, I don't care what it is, I always say to people, just buy the best reel and rod that you can. Okay, it doesn't have to be the absolute top of the line, but buy the best you can. They last longer, and while you wouldn't think of it, doing this does put a bit of wear and tear on the reels because there's such constant, I suppose, aggressive movements onto the reel and the gearing. So reels with better gears will last longer. You don't need a reel with a great big spool. In fact, a lot of the squid reels have a very shallow spool because you don't need heaps of line. Cuts down on the weight of the overall outfit and just makes it nicer to fish with. So light rod, light reel, the right braid, the right leader, you are going to be well and truly in business. There it is. It's got all cloudy, bit of breeze picked up, so I went to a darker jig just to get that more, I suppose, contrast silhouette, and it worked pretty quickly. There we go. Not a big one. Oh. And if you love clothes, good clothes, don't wear them squidding. For that reason, they make a mess. There we go. Good food, good bait. Southern calamari, there's heaps of different species of squid around, but that there is the southern calamari. Only lives for about a year, so he'd only be a couple of months old, that one. That is going to be turned into a bait for a big snapper at some point. Okay, so when it comes to choosing a squid jig, there is so many different brands, colours, styles to choose from. But if I break it down for you, the base colour on a squid jig is the underneath. Okay, this guy here, you can see it's red. That's got a chew mark on it, and I'll go more into that later. So the actual core of this jig has an underfoil or an undercolour, and some have got a pearly rainbow finish. You get clear, you get red, you get blue, black. There's a myriad of colours. They all serve a purpose. Okay, then from there, you've got the outside here. You can get them in a smooth finish like this guy here, okay, so a hard plastic finish, but for the most part they've all got that cloth outer. That cloth again can be different colours, but in most cases it's a whitish sort of reflective finish, and it's generally got a bit of UV through it. And then when you get to the other part of your squid jig, all right, this is the decoration, your stripes, your spots, whatever it may be, and that's what gives it its contrast. So if I look at this jig here, he's got a red base on him. This guy here, if we hold that in the light, that's got a clear base to it. Okay, so obviously it's a bit translucent. If you've got darker conditions, all right, dawn, dusk, nighttime, squid love to feed at night, it's what they do. Then something with a dark base like this, or a cloudy day or something like that, because when that goes over the squid's head, it actually gives a better silhouette than something like that does. On a nice, clear, sunny day and clear conditions, this guy can be exceptionally good. So you've got your base colors to choose from, right? Then we've got our, I suppose, outer cloth colors, all right? So even if we pick this guy here, so look at the base color on that. It's sort of a pearly finish, but with stripes through it. The outer on this is a red back with that nice sort of UV white mesh there. All right, and then on the outside, there's a few stripes. So try and pick stuff that's a bit contrasting. If you're going to get 2 jigs, get a dark one and also get a light one. Don't get 2 that are sort of similar. All right, you will find in a lot of cases squid will eat any colour jig, but just like any fish or any marine species, they do have their days where they prefer a certain colour. So it pays to keep mixing it up. Speak to people, find out what they like. The other thing you'll find with your squid jigs, they come in different sizes. All right, so from tiny little guys like this guy here, right up to, you know, say jigs that are a size 4, 4.5. But if I break this down, we've got 3, 3.5. Okay, there's a 2.5. All right, and what they're talking about is the length of the jig. All right, that's I think that's about a 1.8. Right, and then we can go right up to a 4, which is even bigger again. All right, they've all got slightly more weight, so that does 2 things. A, gives you more casting distance. B, means that jig gets down that little bit better. You don't want the jig to rocket to the bottom, and obviously if you're in 3 meters of water fishing a size 4 jig that rockets to the bottom means that you're just going to get snagged a lot. Not that the squid don't want to eat it, but you're just going to be hitting the bottom a lot more. So having a good range of jigs to suit the area you're fishing. If you're fishing off a rock wall or a pier and it's really deep water, then a 3.5 might be the perfect one. If it's a shallow bit of ground, a 2.5 might do the job just better. When it comes to the size of squid and the size of jig, personally, I don't mind a big jig for small squid. And sometimes when they're really small squid, yes, a small jig is better. But let me tell you that a squid that long will have no qualms about also eating a jig like that. Why? Because in reality, it's not that big. And we're talking about a species that has a very short lifespan, that its sole purpose is to get as big as it can, as quick as it can before it spawns and dies. So a big food item means, you know, a big reward for a species like that. So don't be afraid to use bigger jigs. Absolutely love them. The other thing I love is big jigs have bigger prongs. You get a better hook up, and certainly when you hook that big squid, you tend to, you know, get a better bite on him with these prongs here, which don't have barbs on them, and you'll find you land more squid. So the other thing that you can get in squid jigs is different weights. And for the most part, you know, they'll be sort of, I suppose a jig around this size will be about 14 or 15 grams. But then there is some really cool stuff around, like this guy here. This is a Cephia jig, and it's called a jet boost. And see how it's got a tiny little weight there? So this guy casts like a rocket, but with that tiny little weight, this one sinks ultra slow. So what that allows me to do is fish a bigger jig in 1 to 2 meters of water without it getting down to the bottom too quick. Obviously, if I'm in 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 meters of water, that's not going to be great because it's not going to get down so well. But for shallow ground, if you want a bigger jig and you need to do long casts, then something like this is well worth looking at. So just take a look at the box and it will tell you the weight of the jig, and automatically if you go, it's a much lighter jig, then you'll be able to know that it's going to sink slower. A lot of them will have, you know, XS on the box or slow sink on the box. So obviously that then gives you that information as well. You can also get jigs that are heavier for their size. So one that will be like, it's called a deep, or it will be an extra deep or something like that. So that guy will have a heavier weight on the nose and it will get down a little bit better. So obviously if you're in that deeper water, you can get that jig down a little bit better. So that's the basics of your squid jigs. As I said at the start, when it comes to choosing a jig, try and get contrasting colors if you're going to get 2. But first and foremost, as always in fishing, if you like it and you feel that that would be a good jig and you'd be really confident when you use it, then get it. Confidence is absolute key. So if you love the jig, do it. If you don't love the jig, you'll probably find you won't be as successful with it because you won't fish it with that confidence. That's your squid jigs in a nutshell. Actually, hold up, one last little bit. I mentioned it at the start. This is what a chewed up squid jig looks like. And a lot of people go, oh, my squid jig got chewed up. But this is a good thing. The reason being is squid will go for the weak point on an animal because it's an easy access sort of thing. So that's why certain squid jigs, they'll have a spot on them or something like this. It gives the squid something to aim for. And when a squid grabs its prey, it will grab it, roll it over and bite across the back here, because if it's grabbing a fish or even a prawn or something like that, if they snip the back of the head, they're obviously going to get the vitals, the spinal cord, and it disables the prey quickly. So the squid grab this jig, roll it over, and then go bang with their bird's beak trying to break through there. In doing so, they chew through the cloth, and while a lot of people might go, oh, my jig's been chewed up, I love it when my jig gets a couple of chew marks on it. And what's interesting is, doesn't matter what jig it is, once it gets a bite mark in one spot, you'll find that bite mark or the chew mark just keeps getting bigger and bigger when you're catching more squid. Why? Because that is the sole focus point of the squid. He goes, oh, that's a wound, I'm going to bite right there. So they'll keep biting in that same spot, squid after squid after squid, hence that hole getting bigger and bigger. The other one that's interesting is, quite often, the more your jig gets chewed, the better it works, because it's giving it that big area there for the squid to aim for, to bite. And I've got jigs that have literally caught hundreds of squid, and it's like the more chewed they get, the more squid they catch. Like even this guy here, see how that side's got bite marks in it and that side doesn't, because this has become the focal point for an attack on a squid. So don't be worried about your jig getting chewed up. In fact, love it, because that's what it's doing. It's working better and better the more it gets chewed. They call them hit markers. Some people put little bits of, reflective shell on here. That gives the squid that point to aim at. But for me, give me a chewed up jig any day, it works. There we go. Just a little guy. Easier too if you leave that little bit of line off the rod. Point him out. And then either keep it or let it go. This guy's going in the live well. There we go. That's a little bit better. A little bit better. That's funny that with that cloud coming over, I still had the bright jig on for a while and I didn't get anything. I don't know if I've just hit a better area, but I put a dark jig on and pretty quickly started catching more squid. That's a bit better, that one. So what I'll do, I'll show you how I like to grab them, and then just come in from behind, grab them just at the back of the head like that. There you go. Certainly not a big one, but good size for eating. Alrighty. It's going to be lights out for that guy. I'm going to show you how to clean a squid. Alright, so you can spike a squid, and when you do it, you spike in there, and then in the head. If you just do it in one spot, they don't die. But another easy way to do it is the good old karate chop. So you just go like that and see how that's gone white. That means it's dead. And then just one of those. And now that squid is lights out. And I always say it that if you're going to dispose of the squid, you're better off to do that rather than just chucking it in a bucket, because this will now stay nice and soft, doesn't get rigor mortis, makes better bait, better food. So it's a good way to do it. If not, keep them in the live well till you're ready to go home and then dispatch them. But for now, get that ink out of this guy. Plenty of ink pouring out now. I like to sort of get as much of it out as I can while he's there, rather than making the mess in the boat. All right, so when it comes to cleaning your squid, really simply, everything's joined to that quill at the top half of the body here. So that's all I do, fingers in there, and we're going to separate all the stomach from the hood. So if you just run your fingers up the inside, you can actually see my fingers going up the inside of it there. All right, separate all that as best you can. Grab the hood with your couple of fingers, and then if all goes well, there we go. All the bits and pieces out in one go. There's our squid hood. That makes great bait just there, but you can also cook the head up, makes great eating, all the tentacles and bits and pieces. And then from there, so I'm just watching that I don't drift onto the rocks. See the wings here? If you get the top side of the wing, it sort of separates a bit there. Bust the skin, run your fingers either side, like so. And then we're gonna roll this round, do the same on the other side. Fingers through there, just like that, just like that. The wings can be cooked up, they can be used for bait as well. All right, so the final bit, I'll just get all the bits of skin off, and it is messy. Much prefer to do this on the water or back at the ramp rather than at home. We're going to separate that quill right there. Again, run your fingers up the inside of the hood like so. Pop that out, chuck that in the water, and then from there you just give that a good clean out, and there you have a squid hood that you can cut into calamari rings. You can open it up, chop it into little pieces, you can do whatever you want. The other final thing I do when it's time to eat it is I like to really get a bit of paper towel or an old cloth of some sort and use that to really wipe the hood, and it gets any bits of gunk off it and cleaned. So there you go, squid ready for eating, bait, whatever you want to do with it. Plus you've got the head, plus you've got the wings, so you can pretty well eat the whole lot. That's what's so great about these guys. All right, so if I'm keeping my squid for bait, the thing I do love to do is look after them in the boat and pack them in the boat so that when I get home there is absolutely no mess and they are as fresh as can be. Most of all, never let them touch fresh water. That will wreck them, especially if you're using them for bait. It's a real simple sort of formula. If your fish come out of salt water, only let them be in salt water. Don't go putting them in fresh water. It affects the meat of fish and squid. So what I do, I've dispatched my squid here, and I like to just get these really soft little freezer bags, and out here in the boat I just pack my squid into the freezer bag. These guys are only little, so I'll go 2 to a bag. I don't tend to have, you know, lots in a pile because you don't want to thaw out a heap of it and not use it. Obviously you need to adhere to your bag limits, and they vary from state to state in Australia to different places around the world. And that's the great thing about these things, they are all around the world in their various species. Here in Victoria we're allowed 10 per person. Okay, so make sure you stick to your bag limits. But that's it, that's how I like to pack them. Sort of squeeze that air out of the bag. And with these soft freezer bags, they really, you know, curl around the bait and you don't get any air pockets in there, which then causes freezer burn. Roll it up like a newspaper, even wrap them nice and tight. That goes in the freezer. And that is going to be great bait whether we use it tomorrow or in a couple of months' time. It's absolutely perfect. That's how I like to pack them. That over there is how I like to clean them to eat them. But for now, I'm going to head in. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you've learned something. And next up, we will be doing some land-based squidding.